Here's what I want you to do this Sunday. I want you to look out from the stage. I assume you'll be at somewhere where you can do that, or backstage, or even stand in the back. But just look out over the people who are sitting in church this Sunday. And if you can, I want you to look at some of the faces and look at some of the families. I want you to look kind of, in the front row, look towards the back. Here is what you might not see. One person walked in skeptical to your church. Maybe they were dragged there by a friend who kind of oversold what the service and your sermon is going to be like. Like another, has been coming for a while, but they're still just trying to figure out what the Bible actually says. Maybe another person has served on a team for years and they want to lead something instead of just show up, to be led and to contribute in what they feel is a small way. And then there's this fourth person who has been really steady for a long time, maybe a decade, and you probably even spoke to them when they walked in. But they have been quietly waiting for someone to ask them to carry more. This is one of the most challenging things about church leadership. It's the same room, right? The exact same Sunday service. You're going to deliver the same sermon. You're going to have virtually the same follow-up email that everybody gets on Tuesday, again, whether they read it or not. But you've got four completely different people in there. And one approach aimed at the middle of all of them really reaches none of them. Here's kind of a hard reality, I think, for church leadership. Most churches build for an average person who actually doesn't even exist. And it's not, done intentionally, right? But it happens nevertheless. The sermon that we preach on Sunday tries to evangelize and disciple in the same 28 minutes. The next steps card asks a first-time guest and a 10-year member to check the same three boxes. The email sequence treats curiosity and maturity like they are really the exact same thing, running at the same pace, heading towards the same outcome. And really, when you think about it, that is a funnel, but it's a funnel built for nobody in particular. But it looks good because it's dressed up like a next step for everybody. When you think about your church, and this is where I talk about this a lot. In fact, this is the beginning of what I call the 5 rights. My new book is coming out third book is coming out September the 8th. It's called Remodel. And we're going to look at 5 questions that really do shape how you can think, see, and design every single thing in your church. And it's built on the 5 rights. And the first right is the right person. The language that I use to it are we give these 4 categories of people. The right person can be broken into 4 categories. The first category we call seekers. These are people who are exploring and testing whether this place is safe. They've got questions. They're curious about faith. They're definitely not believers yet, but they're intrigued. But before they will ask, they've got to figure out if this place is safe. We've got the second category. We call them students. These are people who believe they're Christians. So they believe that Jesus died, rose again. They're on board with the big core things. They know that something is true and they want to learn more, but not just learn more information. They want to learn more about what it means for them, for the people around them. That's why we call them students. They're really hungry to learn more. The third category of people in every church, we have shapers. In fact, shapers have knowledge, but now they want responsibility. We call them shapers because they are beginning to shape their life after Christ, right? So they are Christians, little Christs. They are now shaping their life, not just their mind, but their heart and their hands, their lifestyle after Jesus. And then our last category, stewards. Stewards are people who are stewarding their role in the kingdom. They already are carrying weight, but they're wanting to be trusted with more because they're thinking about eternity, right? They're thinking legacy. And here's what I think is so important for us to realize. Each one of these people sits in our churches, and they are at a different place on their spiritual journey. And each one of them needs something different from you this week. And that's challenging. I mean, this is why a lot of times kind of the Sunday that feels like it's going to be the best still feels like it underperforms. I mean, here's kind of the simple problem that I think we accidentally create over and over when we don't understand who is in the room. Because you can preach a great sermon and still lose ground with 3 of the 4 people in the room. If you speak just to seekers, and students are going to stall out because the milk that they should have has just outgrown them by now. Speak only to the student, though, the shaper gets more information that they don't need when what they really want is some more challenge. If you speak just to shapers and stewards, well, the seekers are going to hear things built for people way down the path. It's going to go completely over their head, and they're going to quietly decide that maybe they don't belong here. So the gap that we've got to deal with, and this is good, it's architectural. It's not homiletical, right? It really sits in the design of how we think about messaging and sermons. It's the design of the room. And it isn't even really about the content. The room built for one type of person eventually stops kind of holding everyone else. And it doesn't feel great when that happens. So this is why I've made the right person the starting point for the 5 rights framework. And as I mentioned, this in the book Remodel coming out, it tells you everything about it and how to apply it. So the first right is the right person, as I said. And so before you touch the message, the method, the timing, the step, you have to know who you are actually building for. And most churches skip this and they jump straight to tactics. And there's a reason tactics feel productive, right? We jump to a new sermon series, a new small group curriculum, a new follow-up automation, and none of it actually holds if you never answer the first question honestly. Who is actually in the room and what does each of these people need from us? That's why I actually wrote Remodel. It walks through all of these 5 questions in depth, the message, the timing, the delivery, and the next step, not just the person, but it begins with the right person. Everything downstream depends on getting the first right. Who is the person we're talking to? So here's something that you could do this week if you want to kind of run a little diagnostic. You could pull your team together. Here's just a few steps. Number 1, pull your team together before your next planning meeting or service design meeting and ask one question about your weekend service, or maybe it's your small group offering or a follow-up sequence, whatever it may be. But just ask this question. Who is this built for? Who is this built for? Okay, second step. If the honest answer is everyone, write it down as your diagnostic because everyone isn't a category. In fact, everyone is the absence of one. Number 3, I would love for you to consider how you can map your next sermon series against the 4 types, right? Like mark where a seeker is going to potentially get lost, where a steward's going to get bored, where a shaper is going to not feel challenged, And you don't need to fix all of these gaps by next Sunday, but I do want you to begin seeing them a little more clearly, thinking about them a little more clearly. And then last step, number 4, run the same audit on all of your next steps at some point, right? Again, that's a big job, but write down all of the programs, all the events, everything you do, and kind of audit them to decide who are they really for, right? Like a seeker's next step should never match a steward's next step. Like if your card, your class, or your assimilation email kind of routes everyone towards the same 1 or 2 things, then you've actually built a funnel for a person who might not even be a real person. Now, if you don't think this way, I mean, nothing dramatic is going to happen, at least right away, right? And I think that's the danger. When something dramatic happens initially or immediately, we adjust quickly. But when you don't think this way, I mean, your attendance may still be fine. It may hold. I mean, it may level off or even decline, but not dramatically, most volunteers are probably going to keep showing up and the budget might not even collapse completely, but underneath the numbers, the movement is going to stall kind of quietly, and seekers, they're going to not come back because nothing met them where they actually were when they showed up. Your students are going to plateau because nobody ever really asked more of them. Your shapers are going to drift towards maybe even another church that will use the gifts that they have and challenge them a little more. And those stewards, they're just going to get tired of being assumed rather than engaged. And you don't see any of this in a week. You just see it over years. And that's why churches end up where they are, almost in the life cycle of an organization where it's really, really challenging to get back to that left side, the growing side, the dynamic side. So What would it look like for you to begin to design for a person, not for everyone? And how could you do that? And you're welcome on Sunday, your maybe even the worship set, your message, even in the message, how could you intentionally speak to one category at a time? Or could you give people permission to lean in, or this may seem a little heretical, lean back if they're not really where you are at in the conversation? Again, just knowing that these categories exist is going to make you a much better pastor, and it's also going to make you a better leader.